describes the values of that variable among the individuals who have that specific value of another variable. There's a separate conditional distribution for each value of the other variable. So this is talking about the specific powers, for example, kind of deal. So looking at side-by-side comparison, you can do two different things. You can do a segmented side-by-side bar graph or a segmented bar graph. And so if we look at the different percentages, first of all, when we look at the males, let's just look at the males. So if we look at males, and we look at their different percentages, the total number of males is 85 from the previous table, if you look down at the total for the males. So if we're looking at the males, and we look at the first superpower, which was invisibility, we see that there were 13 out of 85 for the males. And then if we look at the second thing, for super strength, that was 17 out of 85. If we look at the third thing, that was 5 out of 85, which was referring to telepathy. Doesn't look like they like telepathy. Flying was 18 out of 85. And freeze time was 32 out of 85. That kind of surprises me, I guess. It's kind of weird. For the females, if I'm calculating, they have 115 that were surveyed. And for them, it was 17 out of 115 for their invisibility. For the super strength, that was super low, so that was 3 out of 115. Telepathy was 39 out of 115. Flying was 36 out of 115. And freeze time was 20 out of 115. So from these superpowers, we're supposed to do the conditional distribution when we think about what's going on. And as I look at these fractions or ratios as I go across, what we could do is we could make a table. And instead of the table that we saw before, what we would say is, in this table, we have, of course, the percent of males and the percent of females. And then across the top would be each of the different superpowers. So the superpowers were invisibility, super strength, telepathy, flying, and freeze time. And then in each of these categories, you would put the percentages of those. So up above, we have the ratios or the fractions. But inside of here, we're going to put down the actual percentages. So for like the males, it would be 15%, 20%, 6%, 21%, and 38%, for, of course, a grand total of 100%. So this is the total. And if we did the females and wrote down their percentages, we'd have 15%, 3%, 34%, 31%, and 17%, for also a grand total of 100%. So here's a case where if we wanted to make separate pie charts for males and females, we could, because it's parts out of the total superpowers that were possible. Okay, so let's look at this, the side-by-side graph first. I think that'll be easier to start out with because we've already done a bar graph. So here's a bar graph. And in the bar graph, if we looked at the table that was up above, we noticed that both for males and females, the largest percentage that we saw was 38%. So I'm probably going to go to 40 for my percentages. And you should label off to the left-hand side percentages. So here's 20, here's 30, here's 10, so that I show that I have that.
Should we title it?
And so you should title it. Yep. And then down below will be the superpowers. So down below here, I should write down superpowers. Off to the side here, I should have percentages. And then I should make a key somewhere to show the reader what I'm doing. But since I've already labeled my first stuff, the males that is, in blue, I'm just going to tell you I'm using blue for males and pink for females, or whatever color that is for you guys. And I'm going to go from there. So in the first superpower that we're talking about, which was invisibility, we have the invisibility for males was 15, and it was the same for females. So both my bars should look the same. So for males, I have 15%. And for females, I have 15%. And please forgive my drawing on the board. It might not be exact. And this was invisibility, so I would label it under below as invisibility. And then the next set of bars, which was super strength. For the males, that was 20. But for the females, it was only 3. And this was super strength. And then for the third one, which was telepathy, the males were 6. And the females were 34. Wow. That was telepathy. And then the next one was flying. And for the flying, the males were 21. And the females were 31. Okay, so this was the flying superpower. And then the last superpower, which was freeze time, which I don't really know what that means, but freeze time for the males was 38%. And for the females, 17. So the other kind of graph that we could do is a segmented one. And in the segmented one, the vertical side, you just label the 2 different kinds of main categories, which would be the males and the females. So male will be here, I guess. Female will be here. Doesn't really matter. We go reverse order. And then across the bottom will be the percentages. So out of 100%, and if I go by 20s, maybe 20, 40, 60, 80. And what you're going to do is if you look at like the males' percentages and you break them up, just shade it in different colors so they can see which percentage they are. So for example, if you're looking at the invisibility, you would go 15% for the male. So maybe somewhere around here, 15%. And then the super strength would be 20%. So you add on to that and you just keep going. So 20 and 15 is 35. So maybe I'm somewhere around here. And then after that is 6. So that's kind of small. And that was telepathy, and maybe I should put a label at the top. Actually, I'll do that at the end. And then there's flying of 21%. So I should be up to 41, right? 41 and 21 is 62. So I should be somewhere around there. And then the last one is the flying, or sorry, the freeze time, which was 38%. And so I just go the rest of the way to the 100% mark. And that's the freeze time. And this is a segmented bar graph. So the labels across the top then would be the invisibility, and across the bottom I probably should put them. Be easier, I guess, to deal with. I'll just leave it like that. We've already talked about it. So then for the females, I do the same thing, 15%. For their invisibility. Super strength is super small, 3%. Telepathy is huge, it's 34, so now I'm at 52 total. Somewhere around there. And then another 31 for the flying. And 17 for the freeze time. And these are just two different visual ways to see what's going on for the preferences of superpowers. Since if I were to try and label with like invisibility, whatever, they don't match up exactly with the colors, what I would do is I would do something like, oh, okay, so my invisibility is going to be red. And my super strength label is going to be blue. And my telepathy was orange. And my flying was light blue. And then my freeze time was pink. And then that way, again, the reader knows exactly what you're doing. So when we're concluding about that, side-by-side bar graph and the segmented one, I would say yes. There are some major differences. The first one is that males prefer super strength much more than females. And I would also say second, at least in my observation, females prefer telepathy much more than males. Nice.